What if an army's own hidden explosives became the weapon that destroyed its supply lines without a single bomb dropped by the enemy?
Imagine thousands of troops stranded, cut off from vital fuel and ammunition, all because clever reconnaissance uncovered a deadly secret buried beneath their feet. For months, the Russian forces positioned around 130,000 soldiers in northeastern Ukraine had been stockpiling ammunition, relying heavily on two crucial bridges near the town of Belgar to funnel supplies. These bridges weren't just concrete and steel, they were lifelines, feeding frontline units with everything from fuel to artillery shells. But Ukrainian scouts had been quietly marking key logistical points, ready to choke off this flow at the right moment. Then, an extraordinary discovery changed the game: dozens of TM-62 anti-tank mines hidden beneath those very bridges. These were not just any explosives, they were Russian-made, planted by the Kremlin's own forces as defensive traps. Yet, instead of protecting the bridges, these mines became the perfect trap for the occupiers themselves.
On August 29, Ukraine struck with precision.
Using surprisingly cheap, nearly invisible FPV drones, each costing about $600, Ukrainian operators guided these tiny machines beneath the bridges.
These drones could slip through tunnels where electronic interference usually blocks signals.
Equipped to carry a small but deadly payload, they triggered the hidden TM-62 mines packed under the bridge supports.
The result?
Both bridges collapsed in a thunderous chain reaction, sending rubble and twisted steel crashing down.
The 58th Motorized Brigade, which executed the operation, revealed the entire plan and even shared the dramatic footage.
The Russian forces likely never imagined their own mines would be used against them like this.
Traditional reconnaissance drones lost contact under the electronic jamming shields near the bridges, but switching to FPV drones transmitting data via fiber optics allowed Ukrainians to zero in on the explosives hidden beneath. This tactic was brilliant in its simplicity and efficiency.
Instead of expensive missile strikes or heavy artillery barrages, Ukraine used the enemy's own buried explosives to destroy key infrastructure. It was a low-cost, high-impact blow that disrupted the entire supply chain, feeding tens of thousands of Russian troops. The destruction of these bridges was more than just a physical loss. It severed vital railroad links supplying the Volchansk-Kupiansk axis, a critical region holding over 110,000 Russian soldiers. Every day, hundreds of vehicles pass through these points, delivering fuel, ammunition, and food. A mechanized battalion alone burns between 8,000 to 12,000 liters of fuel daily, and artillery batteries require hundreds of shells.
With these arteries cut, the frontline forces were left exposed, their lifelines snapped.
What's even more chilling is that this wasn't a one-off surprise. The very tactic exposes a dangerous vulnerability: if you hide explosives under a bridge, your enemy can find and detonate them against you. This means similar strikes could happen across multiple locations, spreading chaos and crippling supply lines far beyond Belgar.
Russia's attempts to patch the damage with temporary bridges only add to the strain. Longer detours make convoys more visible and vulnerable, multiplying the risk of ambush by more drones or kamikaze UAVs.
The psychological impact on Russian troops is severe too. Knowing their supply routes can be shattered at any moment forces them into smaller, slower convoys, doubling their exposure and logistical costs. Meanwhile, the region itself has become a stage for constant tension. Frequent explosions deep inside Russian territory have normalized sirens and flight cancellations in city centers.
The defensive measures, such as anti-drone nets on public buildings, create an image of desperation rather than security.
Official reports claim dozens of UAVs are shot down nightly, but the constant strain exhausts personnel and resources along the front lines. This carefully executed, low-budget assault reshaped the battlefront without a single large explosion from Ukrainian forces.
It's a masterclass in turning the enemy's own mistakes into strategic catastrophes. What will happen next, as Ukraine continues to exploit these hidden vulnerabilities? The answer could redefine the meaning of frontline warfare.
Previously, we learned how traditional reconnaissance drones failed beneath the bridges due to heavy electronic interference. To overcome this, Ukrainian forces switched to FPV drones that transmitted live video through fiber optic cables, allowing them to stealthily navigate under enemy defenses and pinpoint hidden explosives. Once they identified the concealed bundles of ammunition beneath the bridge supports, a small drone delivered a precise impact that detonated the stacked anti-tank mines.
This secondary blast unleashed a catastrophic chain reaction, collapsing the entire bridge structure.
Instead of raining down expensive missiles or heavy shells, they leveraged the enemy's own hidden explosives, a masterstroke of cost-effective destruction. This method exploited a hidden weakness.
Mines buried under bridges don't show up on standard radar scanners.
These vulnerabilities slip invisibly through the enemy's defenses, concealed within engineering gaps rather than radar cross-sections. The footage reveals the drones weaving flawlessly beneath the culverts, maneuvering at daring angles to strike two separate clusters of mines. Moments later, both bridges erupt into fiery ruins, steel skeletons twisted and crumbled. This was more than just destroying concrete. Those two bridges were vital arteries, the final links in the railway supply chain feeding the Vovchansko-Panskoto axis. Positioned at Belgrade, these crossings formed the choke points controlling the critical routes heading to the Kiev northeast salient, through Veluki in the north and Shebsino in the west. The loading and unloading operations here were clockwork precision, transporting daily shipments of fuel, 122 to 152 mm artillery rounds, and rations directly to frontline units. Estimates place between 110,000 and 130,000 Russian soldiers holding key positions along the Kiev and Sumy fronts. This force included motorized regiments guarding Kharkiv's northeast, mixed mechanized units along the border facing Sumy, and countless reinforcement battalions rotating through the Kursk line. Such vast troop concentrations demand a staggering daily flow of supplies, hundreds of vehicles clattering through these narrow corridors like clockwork. A mechanized battalion alone guzzles between 8 and 12,000 liters of fuel every day. Meanwhile, a single artillery battery using 152 mm guns fires over 150 rounds during intense combat. Every armored column requires patrols and electronic warfare nodes every 10 to 15 kilometers to secure the route. Destroying these bridges cut that vital supply chain dead in its tracks, leaving Russia's own forces stranded in a logistical nightmare, trapped deep inside hostile terrain, isolated from their lifelines.
What happens when the enemy's own planning collapses? When carefully hidden explosive traps become a death sentence for your supply routes?
The devastating consequences ripple far beyond two blasted bridges, they threaten the entire rhythm of survival for over 100,000 troops.
What will the next move be, to dig deeper into this haunting maze of war logistics, or brace for a supply crisis turning tides?
Earlier, we saw how massive daily demands strain the supply lines supporting over 100,000 soldiers, with mechanized battalions consuming up to 12,000 liters of fuel each day, and artillery batteries firing more than 150 rounds when under pressure. These colossal needs make every supply route a lifeline and every disruption a disaster. Now, imagine the scale of armored route security stretching a patrol and electronic warfare station every 10 to 15 kilometers.
Cutting off the two key bridges means severing these vital supply veins right at the source.
Suddenly, about 130,000 troops are stranded without the support they desperately depend on.
The shock?
This wasn't an accident but a catastrophic oversight by the Kremlin, a self-inflicted wound, leaving their own forces trapped in a logistical nightmare.
But here's the twist, this tactic isn't a one-time gamble. It's a playbook anyone can follow. Explosives hidden beneath bridges, once discovered, can be set off by the opposing side itself, turning the enemy's own traps into boomerangs.
The Ukrainians hold the blueprint now, and this strategy can echo far beyond Belgar into multiple cities inside Russia's borders.
Yet, Russia's top concern remains the two shattered bridges in Belgar. These are no ordinary structures, they're strategic arteries where rail lines meet truck convoys, safeguarded by short-range defense systems and electronic warfare nodes. When these vital links snapped, train convoys stalled without their usual unloading points. Trucks faced longer detours, escort requirements ballooned, and fuel expenses skyrocketed.
The old saying, one bridge closes, another opens, falls apart here. War logistics don't allow for quick fixes. Alternative routes stretch farther, grow more exposed to enemy eyes, and become predictable targets for strikes. Ukraine senses this weakness, the bottleneck becomes a heartbeat they can track, a rhythm to exploit. As winter brings fog, ice, and freezing valleys to the Oslin Basin, temporary bridges falter rapidly.
Pontoon battalions rush rotations, straining resources even more. New alternative supply lines, from Belgorod to Kiev and Sumy, lead through the rail culvert bridge triangles near Veluki and Shebekino. Each of these becomes a fresh objective painted in Ukraine's crosshairs. With relentless precision, Ukraine layers artillery strikes alongside swarms of low-cost FPV drones.
These tiny, nimble machines haunt Russian convoy detours, turning each reroute into a hazardous gamble.
What started as 2 destroyed bridges soon escalates into a month-long choke on supplies, fuel, ammunition, and food, grinding to a crawl. So, what happens when the flow of life to 130,000 soldiers slows to a trickle? A stark choice looms: fight on with dwindling resources or fall back and concede ground. And that is where the real pressure begins. But while the Russian forces scramble to patch crack lines and hastily build temporary crossings, another, more dangerous problem creeps in beneath the surface. What if every bridge turned into a ticking time bomb, ready to be detonated not by grand bombs or missiles, but by tiny unmanned vehicles? Who really controls the battlefield when the enemy's own explosives become your weapons, and at a fraction of the cost? The coming days could reveal a new kind of war. Not fought with firepower alone, but with cunning, economy, and unexpected blows from the shadows. And as the pressure mounts, an ominous question arises: how long can fragile supply chains withstand this ceaseless assault before collapse becomes inevitable? The brittle quiet before the storm is deafening. What will break first? The bridges, or the will to hold them? Summary: 2 strategically vital bridges have been destroyed, leading to a significant disruption in supply logistics for Russian forces. This unexpected move by Ukraine has not only crippled the Russian supply chain but also heightened tensions at the front. Imagine a battlefield where time is waning and resources are dwindling. The destruction of 2 key bridges has thrown over 100,000 Russian soldiers into a logistical nightmare, forcing them to make a stark choice: retreat or face increasing losses. As panic spreads, the reality of this situation is staggering. Ukraine has successfully pulled off these attacks with drones costing as little as $600. This cost is a mere fraction of a single precision-guided missile. The clarity of this assault resonates throughout the media, highlighting a vital lesson: strategic infrastructure can be effectively locked down through intelligent, cost-efficient tactics. The success of these operations doesn't just herald an engineering mishap for the Russians, it serves as a chilling reminder of vulnerability that could haunt them further. In the aftermath, the Russian military is scrambling to rectify its losses, but the stakes are higher now. Temporary bridges will require extra troops for protection and mine clearance, and the demand for manpower will stretch their resources thin. As these alternative routes emerge, they offer new ambush opportunities for Ukrainian forces equipped with FPV drones and kamikaze UAVs. Losing 2 bridges on the same day has shaken Russian morale, reinforcing the idea that their supply lines are exposed. This change alters their operational rhythm, leading to smaller convoys, which now face more risk and longer delivery times. Every convocation of troops becomes a target, doubling the logistic strain on Russia. This isn't merely a battle over bridges, it's an unraveling knot that threatens to dismantle their entire operational framework, foreboding hours of uncertainty ahead. How will Russia adapt to this crippling blow? Can they regain control, or will these vulnerabilities continue to expose them to further attacks? The battlefield is an unforgiving teacher, and the echoes of these lost bridges might very well reverberate throughout the entire campaign. In a dramatic twist in the ongoing conflict, it has come to light that Ukrainian forces, without launching a single conventional bomb, effectively left hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers exposed on the front lines. In a strategic move, they successfully marked key logistics points crucial for supplying ammunition to approximately 130,000 Russian troops entrenched in northeastern Ukraine. In a revelation that would shake the Kremlin to its core, Ukrainian reconnaissance operatives stumbled upon a cache of TM-62 anti-tank mines concealed beneath 2 major bridges in the Belgorod region. With these mines in play, Ukraine had a golden opportunity to unleash devastation right at the heart of the Russian supply lines. On August 29, they executed a meticulously planned operation using cutting-edge FPV drones, valued at around $600. These drones triggered the hidden mines, resulting in explosions that shattered the bridges and caused significant chaos for Russian forces. The first bridge was struck near Krny Katur, and the operation was executed flawlessly by the 58th Motorized Brigade, which adeptly maneuvered the drones to avoid detection and successfully detonated the mines. The consequences were catastrophic for the Russians, as these bridges were critical components of their logistics network, facilitating almost all supply chains in the region. In their report, the brigade shared the harrowing footage of the bridges crumbling, setting off a chain reaction of explosions that highlighted the vulnerability of Russian infrastructure. The attacks were strikingly effective due to their stealth and precision, showcasing a high level of tactical ingenuity on the part of Ukrainian forces. The implications of this operation were immense.
The destruction of these vital crossings not only disrupted the supply lines but also left around 130,000 Russian soldiers stranded without critical support. The Russian military's inability to anticipate such an attack exposed severe shortcomings, leaving Moscow scrambling to reassess its defensive strategies. But the Ukrainian success didn't just end there, it laid down a blueprint for future attacks. Adversaries could be figuratively holding a loaded gun against their own heads by stockpiling explosives in vulnerable locations. The success of the operation sent shockwaves through Russian ranks, inciting fear and confusion as they grappled with the reality of their exposed supply routes. The destruction of these two bridges didn't merely signify isolated incidents, they were signals of a broader strategy that could be repeated across Russia, crippling the army's operational rhythm. As winter approached, the already fragile logistics continued to deteriorate. The combination of inclement weather and increased scrutiny on supply routes outlined a deeply ominous scenario for Russian command. Additionally, the operations made it clear that Ukrainian forces were effectively turning the tables in this conflict, forcing the Russian military into a reactive stance that would strain their resources heavily. Now, every delay in supplies could result in critical shortages, unsettling the precarious balance within Russian ranks. On a psychological level, the repeated explosions deep within Russian territory provoked not only panic among troops but also strained urban life in areas like Belgorod, where sirens and air defense alerts became the norm. The government's assurances of safety couldn't mask the growing public awareness of vulnerability. Consequently, these events left the Russian Ministry of Defense scrambling to manage the narrative. Each report of drone interceptions continued to spotlight growing fatigue among the military personnel operating along strategic supply lines, where the psychological burden combined with physical exhaustion created a dangerous cocktail for Russian operations. What does this mean for Moscow's internal security? It suggests that every week, the government must face the scrutiny of a restless population that watches as explosions echo across the border. It raises questions about the efficacy of defense strategies, leaving Russia to contend with an enemy that has creatively harnessed technology against them. As both sides brace for what lies ahead, the stakes couldn't be higher. Each operation now stands to redefine not just military logistics but also the psychological landscape of an army at war, with the potential for even greater disruption still lurking on the horizon. With one miscalculation, the chain of bridges that once seemed unassailable could crumble like so much debris under the weight of persistent conflict. Last time, we saw how relentless drone attacks forced Russia into a continuous cycle of defense. Layers of anti-drone systems rose like walls over Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk, but still, dozens of UAVs slipped through every night. It became clear, the battle was not just about firepower but who could outlast whom in a war of attrition. Now, imagine the quiet tension in city streets when sudden flight bans ground innocent planes. The sharp hum of electronic warfare stations fills the air, trying to snuff out invisible threats soaring low and fast. Despite ramped-up patrols and physical barriers guarding critical sites, small, cheap drones kept swarming relentlessly like persistent gnats. This wasn't a clash of titans but a maddening war of tiny, inexpensive invaders overwhelming costly defenses. Each night's raid brought fresh strain on civil and military operations. Airports flickered between chaos and calm as flights were halted, then resumed, then stopped again, a maddening pulse dictated by unseen winged intruders. GPS signals faltered, and navigation systems stumbled under waves of interference, turning once solid supply routes into tangled, vulnerable corridors. Could these ever be truly secure again? Amid this turmoil, the Ukrainian strategy unfolded with chilling precision. They mixed costly, high-tech kamikaze drones with swarms of modular first-person view platforms. These nimble, adaptable machines could strike distant targets autonomously and in overwhelming numbers. Reports surfaced of long-range launches from mobile, concealed ramps, sending waves deep into Russian industrial zones, a calculated, relentless pressure cooker designed to exhaust defenders. This wasn't mere hit and run, it was a calculated siege aimed at disrupting not just hardware but nerve centers controlling fuel, ammunition, and logistics. With each swarm, the invisible tension in Russia's border cities thickened like fog, threatening to choke the fragile rhythm of military supply chains and civilian life alike. But then, what happens when the very machines made to protect a nation falter under the weight of tiny enemies no one expected? How long before the unseen cracks explode into ruin? Previously, we explored how waves of drone swarms target vital industrial sites, launched from mobile, camouflaged platforms, extending their reach while demanding heavy fuel and personnel resources. This relentless pressure forces supply convoys to alter routes, increasing travel times and risks. Now, let's dive into how this complex battlefield is reshaping air defenses and strategy.
Russia's layered defense system faces a formidable challenge. Diverse threats require distinct detection methods and countermeasures. But here's the catch: swarms of inexpensive first-person view drones, known as FPVs, are turning relentless numbers into a weapon themselves. Overwhelming targets with sheer volume, these low-cost drones strike where it hurts most. In the case of the bridges near Belgar, these cheap UAVs caused a strategic earthquake.
But the assault is broader. Ukraine's sights are set not only on the frontline supply arteries but also on Russia's heartbeats, Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Over recent months, Russian reports claim dozens of UAVs have been intercepted simultaneously near these cities. Defenses tighten, air defense units and electronic warfare hubs beef up along coastal and inland routes.
Patrols intensify, physical barriers rise, especially around these urban centers. Despite this, drones with extended range refuse to relent. They expose a vulnerable soft spot: Russia's intricate network of bridges and supply lines. These narrow corridors, essential for maintaining frontline forces, become prime targets. For Kiev, the low cost and high impact of attacking such infrastructure create a decisive advantage.
But why target Moscow and St. Petersburg beyond symbolism?
Because any alert there can trigger a cascade of consequences. Defense systems might be pulled back, thinning the protective layers along front lines in critical junctions.
This creates fleeting but deadly gaps in coverage. Ukraine's strategy is clear: chip away at the Kremlin's confidence, not just far from the capital but within its core strongholds. In response, Russia turns to immediate engineering fixes like deploying pontoon or temporary bridges shielded by air defenses and electronic warfare.
This is a short-term patch while diplomatic maneuvers unfold midterm and the rebuilding of infrastructure continues long into the future.
Could these temporary measures hold the line, or will they simply expose new vulnerabilities? The battle for control of critical supply routes is far from over.
Every shattered bridge echoes far beyond concrete and steel. It shakes the entire rhythm of war, forcing both sides to adapt or suffer staggering consequences.
What happens if the next wave targets these makeshift crossings? Will the Kremlin's fragile web unravel under waves of low-cost drones? Or can they innovate fast enough to keep their lifelines intact? Only time will tell.
Imagine a supply line so fragile that a single hidden spark sets off chaos for over 100,000 soldiers.
What if the enemy's own weapons became the key to their downfall?
This is the story of how Ukraine, without dropping a single bomb, left massive Russian forces stranded, exposed, and scrambling, using their opponents' mistakes against them in a way no one expected. Previously, we saw how two critical bridges near Belgar were destroyed using a daring combination of tiny drones and concealed Russian anti-tank mines. This wasn't just a lucky strike, it was a surgical blow that cut off vital supply routes feeding roughly 130,000 Russian troops on the front lines. The shockwaves from this operation were felt far beyond the battlefield. Now, the consequences are unfolding, revealing a chess game of logistics, strategy, and desperation. The cost of patching this disruption is staggering. Temporary pontoon bridges can be assembled quickly, but they demand heavy air defense and electronic warfare protection. Every hour of extra convoy time means more fuel burned, more waiting in vulnerable positions, and more exposure to surprise attacks. Rerouting convoys north or south might seem like a solution, but these detours drag supply lines through difficult terrain, sandy patches, waterways, and tangled property disputes, turning every mile into a battle. Think of the endless convoys grinding along the roads, engines humming, tires crunching gravel and kicking up dust clouds that hang heavy in the air. Soldiers wait, restless and tense, feeling the pressure of delays like a tightening noose. And while Russia's air defenses claim to have shot down hundreds of drones, a single breach beneath a bridge can alter the entire strategic landscape overnight. This means ammunition for air defense, maintenance schedules for equipment, and vulnerabilities in the rail and tunnel networks must be analyzed together. Ignoring one piece risks the whole system collapsing. The financial toll grows with every passing day, visible not only in military budgets but on maps showing supply lines choked off, towns cut off from essentials, and soldiers left stranded. Could a similar attack happen in the heart of Russia's power centers? As partial lockdowns continue in Moscow and St. Petersburg, public frustration bubbles up louder. People question why their cities face disruptions now. Increased patrols, drone nets, and electronic jamming may slow the threat, but they won't erase it. This mounting pressure could push authorities toward harsher security measures, risking economic pain and social unrest. The destruction of the two bridges near Belgar was more than a tactical hit. It's part of a broader plan and ongoing campaign that, while not directly targeting Moscow or St. Petersburg, tightens the noose on Russia's logistics from the borders inward. Each week, as supply chains falter, frontline pressure mounts. This could force shifts in battlefield tactics, more precise artillery strikes, increased drone attacks, or even strategic withdrawals if supplies run short. Replacing these bridges isn't a simple fix. Building a new crossing could take weeks. Fixing critical infrastructure like transformer stations or rail junctions might be faster, but if multiple repairs coincide, the entire defense effort risks becoming overwhelmed. The clock is ticking, and every delay tightens the grip on Russian forces. Will the Kremlin find a way to plug these gaps before the pressure breaks their lines? Or will the silent war of logistics and low-cost drones continue to unravel a seemingly invincible force? The answer lies in the shadows beneath the bridges, where hidden dangers wait to be unleashed again. In a stunning maneuver, Ukraine achieved a significant tactical victory over Russia without the use of explosives. Russian troops, numbering around 130,000 in northeastern Ukraine, were caught off guard as Ukrainian reconnaissance units meticulously marked vital logistics points, targeting the heart of Russian supply lines. Their discovery was astonishing: hidden anti-tank mines placed under two crucial bridges in Belgorod. On August 29, at the edge of war, the Ukrainians struck. Using low-cost FPV drones, they set off these mines, obliterating the bridges and exposing Russia's vulnerable logistics network. The operation was executed with precision, as Ukrainian forces activated the mines through cleverly maneuvered drones, proving that innovative tactics can outsmart traditional defenses. The two bridges weren't just structures, they were lifelines for Russian forces, essential for transporting ammunition, fuel, and supplies. With every passing day, hundreds of vehicles relied on these crossroads, consuming massive amounts of resources that sustained combat operations in the region. Destroying them didn't just cause immediate chaos, it unleashed a cascade of logistical nightmares. The supply chain for the troops, now cut off from reinforcements, led to a precarious situation where retreat or severe losses became the only options. The true shock lay not only in the devastation but also in the cost-effectiveness of Ukraine's strategy. Each drone, valued at a fraction of conventional missiles, turned the tide economically. The operation revealed a costly defensive oversight by Russia and urged military analysts to rethink the shifting dynamics on the battlefield. Silent drones became harbingers of chaos, exposing the vulnerabilities of elaborate defenses. With public pressure mounting, the Kremlin faced difficulties as the sight of repeated attacks echoed through the citizenry. Urban centers were on edge, presenting a psychological battlefield as much as a physical one. Anti-drone measures were implemented, but they proved inadequate against the ingenuity of Ukrainian tactics. The situation in Belgorod underscored a critical lesson: in warfare, the balance of offense and defense is delicate, and the consequences of strategic errors can ripple through the chain of command. As the weeks progressed, the prospect of repairing crucial infrastructure became a daunting task. How long could the Russian army sustain itself without its vital bridges and the services that depended on them? Higher-level decisions made in the depths of the Kremlin began to reflect the growing urgency of the situation. The perception of security, once solid, began to fracture, leading to a dangerous ripple effect throughout Russian defenses. Meanwhile, Ukraine capitalized on these vulnerabilities. The loss of the bridges echoed through the ranks of Russian forces, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. Questions loomed: how many more losses could they endure? Each day brought with it the potential for further disruption and more probing challenges to Russian control. Ultimately, the fate of the war hung in a delicate balance. Would the Kremlin adapt quickly enough to counteract these new threats, or would the lessons learned from Belgorod dictate the next chapter of this conflict? The bridges were more than just transport links, they represented the resilience and fragility of hope in a drawn-out battle, a stark reminder that in the world of warfare, innovation can turn the tide and redefine the balance of power. In a bold and strategic move, the situation in Belgorod reveals the fragility of military logistics amidst the chaos of war. The recent destruction of two crucial bridges not only compromised Russian supply lines but also highlighted a significant vulnerability in the Kremlin's operations. With over 100,000 troops stranded and supplies halted, this incident has sent shockwaves through the Russian military structure. The ingenuity of Ukrainian forces, leveraging inexpensive drones to expose and detonate hidden Russian explosives, altered the battlefield dynamics dramatically. This unexpected tactic compelled the Kremlin to confront its own weaknesses, showing that a well-planned, low-cost operation could outmaneuver high-value defenses. As the dust settled, a chilling realization emerged: the bridges weren't just physical structures, they were lifelines, and cutting them off meant leaving Russian soldiers stranded in hostile territory. This scenario serves as a wake-up call for the Russian military, illuminating the dangers of complacency and the harsh realities of modern warfare. The strategic significance of those bridges transcended their mere construction; they were critical arteries supplying essential resources to frontline troops. With Ukrainian forces successfully executing this offensive, the ramifications echo beyond the battlefield, threatening to destabilize the Kremlin's already tenuous grip on the situation. Imagine the dread permeating Russian ranks as news of the explosions ripples through the camp. The fear of isolation grows, haunting the minds of commanders who now question their logistical capabilities. How many more strategic points could fall victim to such tactics? And, with every bridge disabled, will the morale of Russian troops erode as swiftly as their supply lines? The unfolding drama is far from over. As Ukrainian forces exploit this tactical blueprint, they could launch similar operations further into Russian territories. This chilling prospect sends a clear message to the Kremlin: the war has entered a crucial phase where creativity and resourcefulness dictate success. As the dust settles, questions linger: how will Russia respond to this unprecedented blow? Will frantic reinforcements and repairs be enough to regain control? The answers remain shrouded in uncertainty, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The ongoing struggle is not just about land, but control, determination, and survival in a landscape where every decision can tilt the balance of power. Ultimately, the story of the bridges in Belgorod encapsulates a greater narrative, one where the underdogs leverage innovation to challenge the might of an established power. Every strategy they deploy serves as a reminder that in warfare, victory often belongs to those who think beyond the confines of traditional tactics. The battle for logistics continues, and as both sides adapt, the tension mounts. Every move counts, and the outcome may very well hinge on the next twist in this high-stakes conflict.